Deadly, deadly species. The humans. As it happened, it was the Kalakamsku who encountered humans first, and being the Kalakamsku, they immediately attacked. This was unwise. Our galaxy is a big place and has only a handful of sentient species capable of interstellar flight. Yes, foremost of whom are we, the Amiya. As it turned out, unknown to anyone else, the humans had quietly been building a small domain for themselves in one remote and largely unremarkable corner of the galaxy. Nothing major, just a few dozen colonies in the systems closest to their home star. But the important thing is, they had no idea that the Kalakamsku existed, or any other sentient species for that matter. One would think, therefore, that in a first encounter between a species as aggressive, well, aggressive is the wrong word, say, uncompromising, as the Kalakamsku and humans, a relatively primitive race who, moreover, had no idea the Kalakamsku existed and certainly had no experience in dealing with them, that the humans would come off worse. This was not the case. Why? I'm explaining why, impatient fledgling. Now pay attention, because here is the history lesson, and a valuable lesson it is. A Kalakamsku armed recon team found a small human settlement on a world that had been marked for economic exploitation by their coordinator, which passes for their government. The settlement had not been there long, a few years, a decade at most, put up after the initial survey was conducted. As I said, the Kalakamsku are uncompromising. Finding buildings where there were supposed to be none, they immediately set about burning them to the ground. It's entirely possible that they didn't realize that structures were made and inhabited by sentience. Semi-telepathic species are often like that. In the case of the Kalakamsku, thoughts can be transmitted by pheromones. Not good with theory of mind, since they already know the thoughts of other members of their species, and therefore have no need to extrapolate. Thus, they aren't very good at recognizing sentience in alien species. I digress. I was saying that they burnt the human settlement to the ground? Well, they tried to at least, but they didn't get very far. Fortunately for scholars everywhere, a Kalakamsku AR team has helmet-mounted recording equipment, backed up to their ship's black box in real time. That, combined with the human accounts, gives us a fairly reliable account of what happened. The RT leader went up to the first building and, ignoring the unidentified creatures, humans running away from it, began to torch it with his arm-mounted flammer, making short work of it. The next building was slightly larger, 2 stories instead of 1, but the Kalakamsku are big. They're 5 meters long, though their bodies are only 1 wide at most, and normally hold themselves a little under 2 meters off the ground. If they rear up on their 4 hind legs, they have 6 limbs, the front 2 pairs being used as legs or arms depending on the situation. They're even taller. The RT leader shot a burst of flame into the ground floor, then reared up and shot a burst of flame in through the 2nd floor window. For good measure, he let off a few bursts with the multi-purpose laser mounted on his other forelimb. So this avatar of destruction, along with his 19 other team members, is tearing through the human settlement, so far largely oblivious to the actual humans. However, he then spots a vehicle leaving the settlement and cripples it with a laser shot. Coming up to finish it off with his flamer, he finds 4 humans, a male, a female, and 2 juveniles. A typical human family, if you're interested in the exobiology of it, cowering in the wreckage. His recorders show that he definitely pauses here. Perhaps being a team leader, he was slightly less obtuse than most Kalakamsku. Only for a moment though. Then he raises his flamer to continue with the sterilization. It's at this point that he realizes that he no longer has a flamer, or the arm it was attached to, for that matter. He lets out a great keening screech as he realizes he's been injured and backs away from the wrecked vehicle. There, standing between him and the human family, and next to his severed arm, is another human. a human in a fully encasing armored suit who had managed to creep up underneath him and remove his limb before he even noticed the human was there. A human holding a large kinetic pistol and a sword, an actual sword. The Kalukamsu commander stares in astonishment for a moment. He's going into shock, but he still has a few minutes before he becomes catatonic. Then he realizes that he still has his combine laser mounted on his other arm. He brings it up, points it at the human, and fires, and the human simply steps aside. The council chamber remained cloaked in a heavy silence, each council member grappling with the implications of General Callan's report. For many, the notion of relying on humans for military support was a bitter pill to swallow, a stark departure from the traditional alliances and strategies that had governed Axum's approach to warfare for centuries. As the tension in the chamber raised, Chancellor Relis, the presiding figure of the council, rose from his seat. His piercing gaze swept across the assembly, commanding the attention of all who were present. General Callan,
Chancellor Relis began.
His voice echoing thought the chamber. Your report of the events on Xerxes shows us a grim picture indeed. The threat posed by the insectoid creatures is a clear and present danger to our interests in the region. The general nodded in acknowledgement, his weathered features betraying the weight of responsibility that rested upon his shoulders. The defense of Xerxes was not merely a military endeavor. It was a test of Axum's military in the face of enemy, and if their military was capable of safeguarding and defending their interests at any cost. Yet, in the face of overwhelming odds, you and your forces stood firm. Chancellor Relis continued, his voice echoing with a note of admiration. Your courage and will in the heat of battle are a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Axum people and their military. A ripple of approval coursed through the chamber, the council members nodding in silent agreement. Despite the challenges they faced, Axum's military forces had never faltered, proof of their unwavering dedication to duty and honor. But what of the humans? Chancellor Relis inquired, his tone laced with a hint of skepticism. Their intervention on Xerxes raises troubling questions about their involvement in our affairs. General Callan paused, his gaze meeting the Chancellor's. The alliance with humanity was a double-edged sword, a source of strength and uncertainty, in equal measure. While their assistance had been instrumental in repelling the insectoid threat, their motives and objectives remained a mystery. The humans operate on their own terms. Chancellor, General Callan replied, his voice tinged with a note of caution. Their methods may be unorthodox, but their commitment to our alliance is unquestionable. Chancellor Relis nodded in agreement, his expression betraying a flicker of apprehension. The alliance with humanity represented a delicate balancing act, a convergence of mutual interests and divergent agendas that sometimes threaten to unravel at any moment. In light of these developments, it is imperative that we reassess our strategy for securing Xerxes and fortifying our position in the region, Chancellor Relis declared, his voice ringing with authority. We cannot afford to underestimate the threat posed by the insectoid creatures or the complexities of our alliance with humanity. With a solemn nod of acknowledgement, General Callan pledged to redouble his efforts in defense of Xerxes, vowing to confront the challenges that lay ahead. The council chamber was bathed in the soft glow of holographic displays as General Callan resumed his report, his voice steady despite the weight of the revelations he was about to unveil. As I mentioned earlier, the humans' intervention on Xerxes marked a turning point in the battle against the insectoid threat. General Callan began, his words carrying the weight of undeniable truth. Their tactics, though unconventional by our standards, proved to be the decisive factor in repelling the enemy. The council members leaned forward, their eyes fixed intently on the holographic projections that danced before them, each image a testament to the ferocity and brutality of the conflict that had unfolded on the distant shores of Xerxes. The humans fought with a relentless determination that bordered on madness, General Callan recounted, his voice tinged with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Their willingness to embrace extreme measures set them apart from any ally we had ever encountered. As the general spoke, Holographic images flickered to life, revealing the chaos and carnage of the battlefield in vivid detail. Human soldiers, clad in advanced armor and wielding fearsome weaponry, unleashed a torrent of destruction upon the insectoid horde, their courage unshakable in the face of overwhelming odds. Their tactics were ruthless, their methods brutal. General Kellen continued, his voice tinged with a note of disbelief. They showed no mercy to the enemy, no hesitation in the pursuit of victory.
The council members watched in stunned silence as the holographic images played out before
Them, each seen a testament to the raw power and determination of humanity in the crucible of war. The insectoid creatures, once thought invincible, crumbled beneath the relentless assault of human ingenuity and firepower, their ranks shattered and broken by the unyielding tide of destruction. But it was not just their weaponry that set them apart. General Kellen explained, his voice tinged with a sense of reverence. It was their willingness to adapt, to improvise, to embrace the chaos of battle and turn it to their advantage. As the general spoke, holographic displays shifted to reveal the myriad ways in which human soldiers had outmaneuvered and outwitted their insectoid enemies, exploiting weaknesses and vulnerabilities with ruthless efficiency. Their ability to think outside the box, to defy convention and embrace innovation, was truly remarkable. General Kellen remarked, his tone tinged with a note of admiration. In the face of an enemy unlike any we had ever encountered, they rose to the challenge with a ferocity and determination that left even our most seasoned warriors in awe. The council members nodded in silent agreement, their expressions reflecting a mixture of respect and trepidation. The humans' intervention on Xeris had not only secured victory in the face of overwhelming odds, but had also reshaped the very nature of warfare in the eyes of Axum's military leaders. As we move forward, it is imperative that we learn from the example set by our human allies, General Kellen declared, his voice ringing with conviction. Their willingness to embrace change, to adapt and overcome in the face of adversity, is a lesson that we ignore at our peril. With a solemn nod of acknowledgement, the council members pledged to heed the lessons of Xeris, to embrace the spirit of innovation and adaptability that had propelled humanity to victory in the crucible of war. As the echoes of General Kellen's words faded into the recesses of memory, one truth remained abundantly clear. The alliance between Axum and humanity was not merely a union of convenience, but a testament to the indomitable spirit of two civilizations united in the pursuit of a common cause. And in the heart of that alliance, amidst the chaos and uncertainty of the galaxy, lay the promise of a future forged in the fires of war, where the bonds of friendship and camaraderie would endure, unbroken and unyielding, in the face of whatever challenges the cosmos may yet hold. With a solemn nod of acknowledgement, the council members pledged to heed the lessons of Xeris, to embrace the spirit of innovation and adaptability that had propelled humanity to victory in the crucible of war. As the echoes of General Kellen's words faded into the recesses of memory, one truth remained abundantly clear. The alliance between Axum and humanity was not merely a union of convenience, but a proof to the indomitable spirit of two civilizations united in the pursuit of a common cause in different ways. And there, in the center of that alliance, lay the hope of a future forged in the furnace of conflict, where the ties of friendship and support would stand strong and unbreakable through whatever trials the universe may yet bring.
Welcome back, SteamSaga travelers. Today's story in 3, 2, 1. You were warned that your newest crew member, a human, had vastly different biology from all other known races. This was made very clear when they drank all of the galaxy's strongest known poison, saying that they needed a drink of water. We were warned about taking aboard a human crew member. Something about them having an odd biology, different from all known life. But they had the credentials we needed for an engineer that could work in high heat environments for prolonged periods of time. Didn't think much of the squat little thing when they introduced themselves. Can't even tell whether it is a male or a female. Maybe they're hermaphrodites. That's pretty rare. But the environment suit it wore hid all details that might have betrayed its nature to us. They were polite, quiet, and dutiful, never complaining, only interested in working and hanging out in that biosphere it packed in one of the hangars, saying it needed a small, contained environment like its home, which is rare, but not unheard of. Possibly it breathes an unusual gas like argon or pure helium or something, who knows. If anything, it seemed the least weird crew member, considering the sort of life forms I've worked with before. At least, this one doesn't seem to drip corrosive acid everywhere or requires to mate once every rotation or it explodes. But I finally found out what made human biology so unusual when some of the other crew members wanted to invite the human to a game of paradox, Vostroyan draw. The human cautiously accepted, and it went fairly well until they opened a bag and revealed a pressurized container with the words dihydrogen monoxide on it. Water. One of the single most dangerous, toxic, and poisonous substances in the universe. The human didn't notice, but we were all struck with fear. And worse, when they replaced a similar container on their environment suit, and through the suit's tinny speaker came the voice of the human saying, "Ah, lovely. Really needed a drink of water there." The human wasn't charging a weapon. They weren't going to suddenly poison us. The human was drinking water. I had to ask. If I did not, somebody else might have, and they'd have been less subtle. Need a drink often? The human shrugged. Yeah, it slakes my thirst. Prefer some alcohol personally. But water is better to keep the head clear during a game. Alcohol. Another high toxic substance. Suddenly, the crew were a lot more quiet, but the human didn't notice much. We all played nice, even if we were sweating ammonia or hydrogen, fluoride. But afterwards, the crew treated the human very carefully, and me, as the captain, I decided to look into what the human was replicating. To my immediate shock and horror, the human was consuming not only high amounts of water, but also alcohol, and though they had special dispensation codes, they were also eating capsaicin-infused dust on their food, a Class 3 chemical weapon. Worried, I looked up human biology and found that the more I understood, the more distressed I became. Natural production of combat drugs, a life form with water as its primary solvent, only previously thought theoretically possible. Immunity to most chemical and biological weapons. And to top it off, they breathe oxygen, a dangerous flame-feeding gas. And yet, this being completely and utterly poisonous to all known forms of life, was merely fixing power couplings, or testing plasma injectors. So I told the rest of the crew while the human was sleeping, just to play nice, and to not under any circumstances bother the human. Most agreed, but unfortunately, some idiots never listen, not even under threat. So when they tried to slice open the human's little biosphere, which served as their quarters, they were met with the burning heat of the human's warm planet, and with dangerous, toxic water. I still see their corpses when I close all my eyes, distorted, scalded, partially melted. I had to send them home in sealed coffins. The rest of the trip was very silent. The human said nothing, only kept working, and the crew stayed clear of them, not wanting to experience the horrible death that their compatriots had suffered. When we finally got to port, the human was paid, just like the rest of us did, and then they left without a word, trying to secure passage on a cruiser full of silicate life forms. I had a quiet word with their captain, warning them that the human had an unusual biology, vastly different. I could have told them the truth, but who'd have believed me? A species that drinks and consists of the most deadliest poison known in the universe. Nobody'd ever believe it if they didn't look it up themselves, and even then. Truth is stranger than fiction, and the truth is that there is a race of extremely warm, poisonous beings that eat chemical weapons. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check our other stories. I will see you on the next video at SteamSaga.
Humans don't have rules for war. In the vast, interconnected tapestry of the cosmos, Earth's humans were largely considered peaceful. Designated as a Level 2 species by the Intergalactic Federation, they were seen as minor players. involved mainly in commerce and diplomatic endeavors. Everything changed when a rogue member of the Federation instigated a conflict over a resource-rich expanse of disputed space. This territory, nestled between stars and replete with minerals, became the eye of a storm that threatened to disrupt the tenuous peace that had held for centuries. The humans were roped into the fray not by choice but by unfortunate circumstance. Their diplomatic vessel, the Emissary, while in orbit around the aggressor's homeworld, was obliterated by an errant plasma torpedo. The ship's destruction, resulting in the loss of hundreds of innocent lives, was dismissed as collateral damage by the aggressors, a grave mistake. In the grand scale of galactic conflicts, many races had their own legends. The Dracarians had their fearsome star fleets. The L3 had unmatched psionic warriors. But the humans, they were known for their diplomacy, their unyielding pursuit of peace. Yet there was a side to them that very few outside of their home planet knew. A chapter from their history books written in blood and fire. On Earth, wars weren't always governed by rules. For weeks following the unprovoked attack, the galaxy saw no overt response from humanity. Trading vessels came and went, and human representatives attended interstellar conferences with their usual grace and politeness. To the uninformed observer, it appeared as if humans had accepted their loss. But in the shadows, far from prying eyes, gears of war began to turn. Battle groups from the human fleet, silent and undetectable, positioned themselves near key enemy installations. Elite commando units the best Earth had to offer were dispatched to infiltrate and sabotage. A lone human diplomat, Ambassador Lena Dre, was sent to the High Council of the belligerent race. In a sand chamber, under the gaze of countless eyes, Lena calmly addressed the alien council. She recounted the unprovoked destruction of their ship and the innocent lives lost. She spoke of Earth's desire for peace and understanding. Yet her words were met with dismissive laughter. "Your ship was in the wrong place," the council leader sneered. "A level 2 species should know its place, depart our space, or face dire consequences." Lena, undeterred, replied softly, "We hoped for understanding, for reparation. But remember, when Earth is pushed, we don't always push back in predictable ways." 2 days later, chaos descended upon the aggressor's empire. Their mightiest warships vanished without a trace. Frontier outposts went dark. Communication lines were eerily silent. Vital installations suffered catastrophic failures. Within a week, a once proud militaristic civilization was brought to its knees. Without firing a single public shot, without a declaration of war, the humans had exacted their vengeance. The message was clear. Do not mistake Earth's pursuit of peace as a sign of weakness. As swiftly as they had acted, the humans withdrew, melting back into their roles as traders, diplomats, and explorers. The galaxy resumed its routines. Ships traveled and markets bustled, but an unspoken understanding spread like a whisper among the stars. If humanity reaches out with an olive branch, it's wise to grasp it. For in their other hand, they might just hold the power to shake the cosmos.
Neither is it particularly wicked. It is not built to be good, although it certainly strives to do so. It is not built to be bad, although many of its laws and policies have been twisted to perform acts of shocking cruelty. It is built primarily to endure, to stand as a bulwark against barbarism and anarchy, and as such it is astoundingly effective. In its endurance, the Confederation has acquired millennia of customs, rituals, and traditions that trail in the wake of its stately passage through the ages. Its bureaucrats spend thankless lifetimes wading through the morass. It could be argued that, as superfluous as so many of these traditions seem, they serve to give the institution a certain inertia that holds it as steady as any treaties or threat of arms. It is one of our most ancient traditions that concerns us today, and its curious history with one of the Confederation's most recent members. When humanity finally breached the limits of its modest empire and became known to the galaxy's most esteemed institution, we told them our curious tradition. When a new race joins the ranks of the Great Confederation, it is customary to adopt an epithet suited to its particular qualities. Each name is a point of pride. It speaks to a race's history, not only that of its civilizations, but of its evolution. Itself, What gave it the strength to drag itself from the morass of base life up to the stars? The names are not complex, and follow a basic scheme. The brachiating flow, whose spindly towers reach almost as high as their ambitions, became those who climb. The staunch Modelure, who grew from nomadic herds to traveling cities to armored drifter fleets, took the name those who wander in strength. The telepathic hive mind of the Rictikit, working in perfect synchronicity, adopted those who are one. It's a foolish tradition, as so many are. But just like so many others, there dwells in it a curious truth. A name is a promise, after all, and a warrior of those who die gloriously is likely to go down fighting for little more reason than to maintain the reputation of their species. More than anything, it displays the quality the race is most proud of, or most aspires to. There are those who say it oversimplifies, or pigeonholes, or grandstands, but the tradition has held firm through thousands of cycles of peace and strife alike. So, in spite of its antiquated roots, the topic of which name the humans would choose dominated Confederation discussion for subcycles on end. Not merely a rich vein of gossip, their choice would glean valuable insight for diplomacy, trade agreements, and the entertainment industry. Those who approach with caution are hardly going to be pulled in by gambling advertisements. After all, the humans made their decision with an almost indecent haste. After only a handful of cycles, their representative took his place at the Confederation Senate, to be formally inducted among our ranks. Call us, they said, those who run. It was a title that reignited gossip for cycles to come. Biologically, it made sense. The upright primates were certainly built for running, not with any particular speed, but with a casual lope that seemed to serve their purposes. But there were 1,000 others they might have picked. What kind of a species names itself for cowardice? What kind of promise does that make? The following cycles only served to reinforce the opinion. The Terrans proved to be a race unusually averse to conflict. Where others would fight, they negotiated. Where others would seize, they gave ground. When pushed to a fight, placed between hammer and anvil, they always managed to squeeze out and find some kind of peaceful resolution. This manner gained them many friends, but few allies. Who could rely on a craven to support them in crisis when no peace could be found? When the time came to take a stand, who could trust in those who run? Perhaps it was the name that encouraged the Larashi in the end. No species enjoyed such a controversial place in the Confederation as the Larashi. Time and again they have sparked conflict and chaos for their own gain. Time and again they have proven their worth when the Confederation needs the proper application of brute force. Their evolution as apex pack predators is reflected in their lightning-fast attack fleets and cutthroat politicking. One way or another, the Larashi have well earned their epithet of those who scourge. It is perhaps unfair to judge every individual of a species by their race's reputation. Certainly there have been Larashi known for their kindness, their forgiveness, and hundreds of cycles with the Confederation might have distanced them from their most savage practices. But a name is a promise after all. Historians across the galaxy can appreciate the difficulty in pinning down the root cause of any particular conflict. The Larashi were certainly looking to expand their holdings, and the virgin Terran territories were mightily tempting. But the Larashi royal family was also facing dissent within its aristocracy and was in need of a common cause to unify the ranks. And of course their economic power had diminished from a number of recent trade sanctions, and they ached for a chance to remind the Confederation of their military strength. But it could also be argued that the Larashi had simply done it to many fledgling races before, and were more than happy to do so again. Those of us sympathetic to the humans realized too late the careful web the Larashi had drawn them into over 100 minor disputes. Certainly the Terrans had no idea. They had been in the Confederation a scant handful of cycles. The Larashi had navigated its legal morass for centuries. They fitted humanity's noose with grace. If the Larashi had merely declared war on the Terrans, we might have blunted the blow. There are a number of Confederation bylaws and procedures in place for these kinds of things, ones that the victims of the Larashi have relied on in past conflicts. Amnesty, rules of engagement, foreign aid, and the like. But this was different. The ritual is known as Corral. It pits one Confederation member against another, with no aid or intervention from other members. In theory, it allows the resolution of disputes without setting off a powder keg of alliances and counter-alliances. In practice, it is used most often to cut a vulnerable race out from the herd. It is a savage tradition from the early cutthroat days of the Confederation. But as has been said before, age lends inertia to tradition, and it has proven frustratingly difficult to root out. To declare Corral requires highly specific conditions to be met, ones the Larashi had carefully engineered. This conflict formed a piece of an elaborate picture, framing the Terrans as unjust aggressors, and the Larashi as the victim on paper at least. And in an institution so woefully hidebound as the Confederation, paper was the most effective witness. When every piece had been placed, all that was left was the official declaration of war, which they proceeded to do with gusto and aplomb. On the floor of the Confederation Congress, under the eyes of 1,000 delegates, the Terran senator begged the Larashi to reconsider. They were a fledgling strength, he said. This war, and all that happened next, would define the future of both races. The Larashi senator laughed in his face, a laugh from those whose scourge unnerved everyone else in the room. Few predators manage to ascend to sentience, and the sight of their cruel, sharp teeth stirs primal fears long buried beneath the veneer of civilization. He drew forth an elaborate scroll, the official declaration of war, and cast it at the Terrans' feet. He spoke the ancient challenge. Corral, he said, embrace us not. Our gifts are blades now, and cut at your hands. Call not to your allies. Their doors are closed to you. Stew not for terms, they shall be denied. Flee to your dens, gather your strength, and make your stand. We are coming. The Terrans had a modest fleet, capable of chasing off pirates on their trade routes. And of course, as soon as war had been declared, they began the long process of warship production. Factories not used since before humanity's unification cranked into life, but it would be long cycles before they could form defenses across their worlds, and the Larashi had long planned for this war. Indeed, their stockpiling of military assets was the subject of one of their many political conflicts with the humans. Before they could properly mobilize, the Larashi had their pick of the Terran territories. The only question was which planet they would hit first. The Cornico stars were a tempting choice. They lay closest to Larashi territory and would make a fine addition to their holdings. But they were virgin ground, underdeveloped. They could be claimed in time after they had broken the back of the Terran defenses. Earth itself was tempting as well. The loss of a race's homeworld would be a tremendous blow, one that has sent many an empire on a slow spiral to extinction. But humanity was well aware of its vulnerability and had prepared accordingly. More than a quarter of their forces were positioned to defend their home system. The Larashi could take it eventually, but the losses would be tremendous. They needed a symbol, something that would shatter humanity's resolve in a swift, singular strike. Something they did not defend properly. Something they took for granted so much that they could not imagine its loss. It might have taken years to find, but, as has been said, they had long planned for this war. Humanity's homeworld was still slowly healing from the eruption of their desperate climb to the stars. It would take hundreds of cycles to scrub the poison from its seas and skies. Now they were wiser. Their new worlds were developed with a careful eye on their ecosystems. But even among its harmonic compatriots, Avalon stood apart. Avalon was their chance to be better. The citizens of its cities were wardens of the planet, not its rulers. The trees stood tall, the animals roamed free, and the fields of tall grasses stretched from one horizon to the other. The planet stood as a symbol of everything the Terrans aspired to. Or at least it did. Everything whose scourge descended upon Avalon like wolves on the fold. For the first time its residents looked up to see fire in the night sky as lasers seared through the meager defenses. The Terrans fought with courage, ferocity, and desperation. It didn't matter. Within hours the Larashi had taken the planet. They might have abducted the native humans, shipped them off for chattel. They might have hung their banners from their city walls, taken their forts, looted their treasures. Those whose scourge might have chased off those who run and ruled comfortably over their new holdings. But a name is a promise, after all. They took no captives on Avalon. They claimed no prizes, landed no colonists, plundered no resources. They glassed the cities with plasma bombardment and set the very atmosphere ablaze. The fields and forests burned, the seas boiled, and the animals within them died bewildered to their fate. Every shining jewel was left a black, lifeless rock. The Larashi made an example of the world. It taught the Terrans a lesson. There was no act taboo under Coral. The only hope of humanity's survival lay in unconditional surrender. The counterattack was inevitable. The Larashi had cut humanity to the quick. There would be a single furious retaliation, lashing out at their hurt. But it would be the fury of a wounded beast. The next strike would be weaker, and the next weaker still. The Terrans who scourged had evolved from deadly predators, worrying at the flanks of larger prey until they collapsed. This kind of war was second nature, so the human assault on the Larashi stronghold of Vakalat was hardly unexpected, nor was its ferocity. The scale of the attack, however, merited comment. The Terran military was a paltry thing, stretched thin to cover their merchant fleets. But now it was the Vakalat's turn to look up at the night sky as it filled with 1,000 new stars. No guardians of the merchant fleets these, but the fleet itself. Cargo haulers, mining ships, tuggers, now crudely mounted with whirling rotary cannons, single-shot railguns and cheap missiles. The Larashi, proud warrior fetishists of the military elite, learned a human term that day technicals. They also learned the effectiveness of weapons that are not weapons. Rivet guns, plasma cutters, and mining drills seem hardly practical for the purposes of warfare. But when a Larashi battlecruiser is swarmed by a half-dozen ships with empty magazines, and fried railgun coils, charging at the larger prey to worry its flanks, the argument falters, at about the same time as the fuel tanks. Vakalat was a fortified planet, its forces were formidable, its captains seasoned, and within a single sub-cycle it had fallen. To those it had scorned as warriors, to forces it had never even considered a threat, to those who run. This, in itself, was not extraordinarily worrying. Larashi military theory is aggressive to a fault. They put little faith in defense. They had lost ground, but they would soon make it up, and more besides. The Terran spirit had been broken. They would take the next planet with ease. Except they didn't. They sent their fleet to Mead, the mercantile planet, to swallow the world in 1,000 mouths. But at Mead they were glutted, choked, suffocated by 10,000, and now the Terrans had taken Rokoshok, the Larashi breadbasket. They tried a daring lightning strike at Port, the Terran warp hubway station, to hobble their forces. But at Port they were turned aside, and then the humans had claimed the shipping yards of Barakan, and the Larashi found themselves hobbled. They burned the technicals in droves, but now the humans were manufacturing true battleships, faster than anyone could have imagined, and they were terrors. The Larashi were masters of war. They had sneered at the crudely rigged merchant vessels, but now they could appreciate these new ships with an expert's eye. They traced the cruel, graceful lines of the prows. They admired the engines, envied the shields that shrugged off their fire, feared the searing lasers that tore their own apart. At every battlefield the Larashi looked upon those ships and measured their own destruction. To the Erg. On the floor of the Confederation Congress, the Larashi senator called for a new motion. His bearing was still proud, his sneer unyielding. But there was a hesitance to him, an uncertainty that had not been there before. He called the Terran senator to the floor. This war had cost both factions, he said, and the Larashi had proven their point. The ritual of corral would be called off. Those who scourged would withdraw their fleets. The Terrans would return to their systems, and 1,000 Confederation subcommittees would swoop in to provide aid to the war-torn nations. It was a good deal. Those who run had proven themselves unexpectedly vicious in battle, and had expanded their holdings considerably from the conflict. Few fledgling races had managed to hold their own against those who scourge, and none of them had actually claimed territory in the process. Already a number of nations offered their allyship to the small race, eager to recruit those deadly ships for their own purposes. But small they still were, a mere fraction of their aggressors, and no amount of practical ingenuity or sheer righteous fury could close that gap. Those who run had stung the beast and turned it from its path, but they could not hope to maintain their success against Larashi fighting to defend their heartlands. The deal they offered was the only real option. Under the eyes of 1,000 delegates, the Terran senator approached the Larashi. He drew a small scrap of fabric forth from his uniform. As he slowly unfolded the charred fragment, we realized what it was. From an expanse of blackened stone and glass stretching from one horizon to the other, all that was left of the flag of Avalon. He cast it at the Larashi senator's feet. "Corral," he said, "the blade cuts both ways. You began the ritual, you shall see it finished. Call not to your allies, their doors are closed to you now. Sue not for terms, they shall be denied. Flee to your dens, gather your strength, and make your stand. We are coming." The war continued. The Larashi tried every war trick they had learned in 1,000 lifetimes. They laid elaborate traps, picked away at Terran fleets, made glorious last stands. The ships of humanity, dreadful dreadnoughts as they were, could still be tricked, trapped, dragged down by numbers. Their burnt-out husks became a common sight among the Larashi territories, but it was never enough. The Terrans lay traps of their own, fought as well as those who scourge. Every Terran ship the Larashi burned took a score with them, and more than that was their sheer overwhelming relentlessness. No matter how many were killed, more came in an endless tide. In ravaging those who run, those who scourge have stumbled across something completely unexpected, an equal in war, perhaps a superior. And that was the true tragedy to the Larashi. If they had nurtured the humans, joined forces, they might have taken on the Confederation itself. But in their pride, they had wounded a beast and now felt the full measure of its claws. Slowly, quietly, we and the other nations withdrew our offers of allyship to the Terrans. We had mourned them as victims, rooted for them as underdogs. Now we feared them as monsters. Belatedly, we remembered what the Terran ambassador had said: this war, and all that happened next, would define the future of both races. Slowly we remembered how desperately he had pled for peace. Only now did we realize what exactly he had tried to hold back. The war continued. The Terrans cut a hole into the Larashi territories and poured into the wound in droves. Those who scourge could not stop them, any more than they could stop the moons in their orbits. Humanity did not scourge the planets they captured, they merely burned their shipyards and launching zones, crippled their ability to mobilize, and moved on. As they blazed a line across the planet, their aim became clear. Nothing less than the Larashi homeworld itself, Katanant. The story of its fall threatens to become repetitive, an echo of every battle before it, differing only in its tremendous scale. The Larashi fought with courage, ferocity, and desperation. It was not enough. On and on they came, until Katanant's low orbit filled with charred metal and flesh. When the dawn rose on the Larashi's ancient homeworld, the sun shone haphazardly, filtered, through the thick haze of war debris, and it dawned on a Terran flag. The war continued. Katanant was theirs. They had cut the Larashi to the quick. There was a furious counterattack, of course, but it was the fury of a wounded beast. The next strike was weaker, and the one after that. They were bleeding out now, on a slow spiral to extinction. But the Terrans were not content to wait. They had taken the homeworld, true, but they did not hold a planet responsible for the genocide of Avalon, nor did they blame the entirety of the Larashi race for the war crime. No, they knew where to lay that blame. The Larashi royal family, whose word has been law for time immemorial. It was on their orders that Avalon burned. Bringing them to justice, however, proved difficult. After the first Terran ship appeared in Katanant's skies, the royal family had quietly slipped, away to a neighboring system. Their absence was not lost on the planet's defenders. Indeed, it was a not inconsiderable factor in their defeat. Still, humanity had been denied their true goal, so they took that system too. Once more the nobility fled, and once more the Terrans followed. When that system had been taken in turn, the royal family split for better chances. Terrans disguised themselves and hid amongst the Larashi populace. Some paid enormous bribes to other nations to take them in violation of the ancient ritual. Some sought refuge with the pirates in the outer fringes, who paid no lip service to Kural. Still, humanity did not relent. Where brute force did not suffice, they turned to cunning. Their agents infiltrated their havens and tracked down each offending member with an ability that bordered on the uncanny. Terrans hiding amongst their own were extracted. The nations sheltering them were confronted, threatened with exposure unless they were surrendered. Still, brute force had a use. At the fringes of known space, the Terrans ravaged the outlaw fleets with a cruelty that those who scourged could respect. They had started the war fighting pirates. Now, in its waning days, they found themselves fighting them once more. But now they wielded an intent and fury the outlaws had never seen. Their every hidden holdout was rooted out and burned. It wasn't long before they gave up the nobles to stem the bloodshed. And even still, the war continued. The last free member of the Larashi royal family, the son of the ruling king, fled too. The last holdout he had. The planet Ublo, whose unique ionic atmosphere shorted out any technology more advanced than a sharpened stick. His ship cried to a dead hulk, his tools destroyed. He landed on Ublo's surface with nothing but a parachute in his skin. A one-way trip in every sense. But that was all right. He was of those whose scourge evolved to take its place at the top of the food chain. Ublo was a world dominated by dry, wind-scoured plains, but gain could be found if one knew where to look. He could survive here, a banished prince, and keep a shred of his pride. The Terrans would not dare chase him to Ublo. Any who came after him would not be returning. They would have to content themselves with leaving him in exile. He held that certainty close to him. It warmed him on cold nights, gave him comfort in isolation. It kept him going for almost a full cycle, right up until he saw the Terran ship descending, and felt it wither in his chest. The ship crashed, as they always did. But like the prince, its pilot landed safely, a single human female bringing nothing more than her flight suit and a single knife. She looked at the wreckage of her ship, her only hope of a journey home. Then she turned toward the endless plains, and she began to run. There are stories told of the long chase between those who scourge and those who run. Were we in a more romantic age, it would have been the stuff of myths. As it were, it was relegated merely to historical archives and melodrama. It went on for cycles. A planet is an unfathomably large span to travel on foot, and even though the Terran had landed as close to the LaRoche ship as she could, that reduced it to merely a fraction of unfathomable. She had no devices with which to trace the prince, no vehicle, no medicine. But then again, neither did he. The LaRoche are ambush predators, built for quick bursts of speed. They explode out at their prey, all claws and teeth, for that one short chase that determines life or death. A slow LaRoche can outpace a fast human on their worst day. But humans are not built for bursts of speed. They are built for endurance. A fact the prince slowly became aware of over his endless flight. The Terran ran slowly, but she simply didn't stop. The LaRoche ran as far as his aching legs could take him, but every time he stopped to rest, the distance between them closed. He simply could not escape her. Neither could he evade her. He used the ancient tricks of the wild, crossing streams, avoiding soft grounds, doubling back. He laid traps for the human with as much ingenuity as he could conjure. But none of it worked. She could trace him by the bending of twigs, a scent on the wind. She saw through his traps as though she had laid them herself. The Terrans had chosen their hunter with care. The LaRoche prince, apex predator that he was, soon learned a human term: persistence, hunting. Perhaps if he had faced her directly, he might have defeated her. At the end of things, he was still a killer by nature, and she with no more weapons than a knife. But his courage was gone, his pride broken, his homeland taken, his nation conquered. He could not hope to defeat her any more than his species could have defeated hers. In the end, all he could do was run, and she was much better at that. The Terran occupied every waking moment of his thoughts. He could not even escape her in his dreams. Closer and closer she came, until he ran himself ragged, until he crawled desperately through the desert, until he finally collapsed. When she finally arrived and put the knife to his throat, he was almost grateful. 10 years to the day, the Terran ship had crashed on Ublo's shores. A hole opened up in the planet's protective ionosphere. Not for long, barely time enough for a small craft to descend to the surface and return. But even as it touched down, 2 figures could be seen, a human and her LaRoche captive, arriving at the predetermined landing site. The technology to defy Ublo's particular prisonous atmosphere is not beyond imagination. It could be achieved by a vast team of scientists with the proper motivation, but it is an extraordinary expenditure of time and resources to capture a single individual. It seemed a fitting capstone for humanity's most revealing conflict, the lengths to which they would go to avenge their injustices. And at last the war ended. We watched in dread fascination as the humans determined the fate of the LaRoche. The race was entirely at their mercy. They might claim their entire territory as a prize of war, or make vassals of them. Then again, Enslaving the entire population was not out of the question, nor was a complete extermination. No act was taboo under Corral, and the Terrans had proved themselves a merciless species. But the humans did none of these. They imprisoned the royal family on charges of war crimes. They were shipped to the ruins of Avalon. Already the humans had begun the arduous process of recultivating life on the ruined planet. Already the first basic stages had begun to grow amid the glass and ash. It would take more than 1,000 cycles before the planet regained its former glory. But the LaRoche royals would work its earth their entire lives to quicken the process. The remaining nobility, those with too tenuous a connection to claim complicity for Avalon, were gathered at Catonant. The LaRoche, whose royal dynasty stretched back unbroken through its entire recorded history, learned a human term that day: balkanization. Their mighty kingdom was splintered into a dozen minor nations, whose petty feuds and infighting would undermine any attempt at a unified front. And like that, those who scourged would pose no more threat to any race. Someday, a strong enough personality might unite the kingdoms once more. But it would be many cycles in the future, and they would think hard before attacking the humans again. On the floor of the Confederation, the Terran senator submitted a motion long in the making. The war had gone on long enough, he said, and they had proven their point. Corral would be ended. Aid could be given. The 12 new LaRoche subdelegates raised no objections. In the hours afterwards, I had an opportunity to meet with the Terran ambassador over refreshments. Had his species barely won the conflict, he might have been swarmed with admirers and sycophants. But their overwhelming onslaught had earned more fear than respect, and so he sat alone. I summoned courage and approached him. He in turn welcomed the company. "You're braver than most," he said. "Before we were weak and I had many friends, but now we are strong and I foresee a lonely future. Can you blame us?" I said. "We never could have imagined what you were capable of." "We haven't had to be warriors for a very long time," he said. "But we never forgot how. A name is a promise, after all. Those who run." He laughed. "Not quite," he said. "That was a mistranslation from a malfunctioning device. By the time we realized the error, it seemed too trivial to correct." "A mistranslation?" He smiled, and for the first time I noticed the sharp teeth at the corners of his mouth. "It's not those who run," he said. "It's those who chase.